It was a day I'd come home from work earlier than usual. From the bedroom, I heard a strange breathing. The instant I moved to throw the door open, the housekeeper, a woman of few words, grabbed my sleeve with all her might. "Ma'am, you absolutely must not open that door. There are women in this world who want nothing more than a peaceful family and a dinner table filled with laughter. Women who have lived their lives believing only in a husband who will be their ally through any storm. But life, everyone, does not always repay patience with peace. Sometimes, the more you endure, the more lightly you are taken. And the more you stay silent, the more you're treated like dirt on the floor. They say sometimes you have to lose the battle to win the war. But if that endurance is only for others, while your own heart is being torn to shreds, is there any value in it? I, too, once thought that a wife must always be accommodating. I believed that protecting a family meant embracing even the faults of others. It wasn't until I stood before that bedroom door that evening that I finally realized, if, in that moment, I had given in to my anger and opened that door, the rest of one woman's life might have been entirely buried in darkness. In the South Loop of Chicago, a cold autumn rain was drizzling over the ranks of high-rise condos. The building lobby was filled with the damp smell of rain, and the familiar scene, a mix of delivery scooter buzzes and couriers' footsteps, felt unusually melancholic, like a long, drawn-out sigh. My name is Alara. I'm 36, and I work in accounting and administration for a tech firm downtown. Because my job involves staring at receipts and contracts all year, I have a reputation for being meticulous, and am often told I'm a bit all business. But for a woman like me, who lost what was precious to her so early on, how else can you survive in this world if you don't thoroughly protect yourself? I married at 27. My husband Silas was 2 years older and worked in construction. When we were dating, he wasn't the talkative type. He was straightforward, didn't go to happy hours much, and was the kind of man who would stop by the supermarket on his way home from work to pick up a vegetable or a piece of fish. I still remember one night when I was working late. He came to my office lobby, handed me a container of warm soup, and smiled good-naturedly. "You should eat a little something. You're not a machine. If you keep running like this, you'll collapse." That one joking remark warmed my heart and melted it away. At the time, I had a small one-bedroom condo in the South Loop. The mortgage was almost paid off. It was by no means luxurious, but it was a comfortable place where I could put pots of cherry tomatoes and geraniums on the narrow balcony. That home was the crystallization of my youth. The days I'd made do with takeout for dinner, the nights I'd stared at spreadsheets until my eyes were bloodshot. And above all, it was a home filled with the precious money my late mother had left for me. My mother passed away about a year before I got married. With a hand that had grown thin as a withered branch, she gripped my hand tightly from her sickbed and told me, "Alara, when you get married, you have to learn to be patient. But listen, don't crush yourself to the point where, as a result of enduring everything, people stop treating you with basic decency." At the time, I just thought she was saying it out of concern for her daughter, who would be marrying without much family support, and I only shed tears. I never dreamed that her words would later become the life jacket that would save me from the storm raging in my own home. After we married, Silas moved into my condo. I never once looked down on him for moving in with me. I believed that the place where a couple lives and builds their life together is what makes a home. I never brandished the deed to the condo or acted superior. I simply thought it was natural for it to remain in my name, as it was a home I had bought before marriage, my separate property, and my mother's money was in it. I figured that if I was clear about it from the start, there would be no trouble later. But as the old saying goes, peaceful days don't last long. About 3 months after we got married, Silas's mother, Judith, came to Chicago from rural Wisconsin. Judith, 62 at the time, was a petite woman with her hair neatly done up, and she had a habit of saying, "I don't need much at my age. Just to see my children living happily together is enough." She said her house in the country was too quiet, and just hearing the wind scrape against the roof at night made her feel depressed. Silas, perhaps feeling uneasy about his mother, glanced at me and said, "What do you think about Mom staying with us for a while? The house would be a bit livelier, and we'll need someone to help look after the kids when we have them, right?" I fell silent for a few seconds, then gave a small nod. It wasn't because I was exceptionally magnanimous. I just thought it was wrong for a son to leave his elderly mother all alone and lonely. I also had a naive hope that we would naturally grow fond of each other as we lived together. I believed that if I showed kindness, she would return it. It was a truly foolish time. On the first day Judith arrived, I decorated the small room beautifully and even prepared a new set of bedding and a gentle glowing indirect lamp. Judith looked around the room and beamed. My daughter-in-law has such good taste. The house may be small, but it's so lovely. Silas really got himself a good wife. Those words made my heart feel so warm. When we ran into neighbors in the elevator, Judith would often brag about me. Our Alara is so capable. She works and manages the household perfectly. It's like having another daughter. But do you all understand? Some compliments, though they seem coated in sweet sugar, leave a bitter aftertaste in the back of your throat once you chew and swallow them. Outside, she called me her daughter. But inside, once the front door was closed, her thorny words quietly began to wound my heart. One day, I was reviewing the final mortgage payment documents. Judith, who was snapping green beans at the dining table, glanced over and asked, "Is this house still in your name, Alara?" I replied, "Yes, it is. I bought it before we got married. The mortgage will be completely paid off in a few more months, Judith." Judith said, and started snapping the bean stems with a crisp sound. When you marry a man, Alara, you become part of his family. It's not right to hold on to your things so tightly. If you're always thinking yours and mine, a family can't last. I answered with a slightly strained smile. I understand what you mean, Judith. I just thought it was safer for everyone to keep the paperwork clear. Judith slammed the beans in her hands into a colander and said in a low voice, "Young people these days are too clever for their own good, always trying to divide everything up so neatly. When I got married, there was no such thing as yours and mine." I didn't answer further. The stew was simmering on the stove, letting off hot steam, but for some reason, I felt a cold wind blow across my face. That night, I told Silas about it. He was looking at blueprints on his smartphone and just laughed it off good-naturedly. "Mom's from the old school, that's all. She just has old-fashioned ideas. You don't need to worry about it. What's important is that we get along, right?" Staring at him, I asked back in my mind, "If it's so important, why don't you say something firm to your mother?" But not wanting to sour the atmosphere of our newlywed home over my one comment, I held my tongue. After Judith came, my condo slowly began to change. My favorite vase on the dining table was put away because it was in the way. The cute dishes I liked were pushed to the very back of the bottom cupboard, reserved for guests. The dishes served at the dinner table were also tailored to Silas and Judith's tastes. If you're going to live together, you have to compromise. If I complain about dishes or food, I'll be seen as a petty woman. That's what I told myself. But when compromise becomes a one-way street, it's no longer a give and take. It's a dead-end alley. The further you walk, the harder it is to see the exit. One day, I came home from work and heard Judith on the balcony, talking on the phone in a low voice with someone. "Yeah, the deed is in Alara's name, but if they live together long enough as a married couple, it'll all become Silas's eventually. I'll slowly work on it, so don't you worry." Standing in the shadow of the kitchen door with grocery bags in my hands, my heart went cold, as if I had missed a step on the stairs. Noticing me, Judith flinched for a moment but then smiled as if nothing had happened. "Welcome home. What did you buy today?" I managed to smile, but my mouth was bone dry. "Hi. I got some potatoes and pork, Judith." That evening, dinner was roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and a garden salad. As usual, Judith placed a tender piece of chicken on my warm plate. Silas asked gently if I was tired from work. On the surface, it was the very picture of a peaceful family. Only I knew, from the moment I heard the words, "I'll slowly work on it," this small condo was no longer a safe nest just for my husband and me. In Judith's eyes, this house was nothing more than a prize that should eventually belong to her son. That night, I stood on the balcony and paced for a very long time. The chilly autumn wind rustled my hair, and the mist felt cold on the back of my hands. Below the window, the scenery of a normal, warm daily life unfolded. People walking hand in hand with their children, neighbors exchanging greetings. Meanwhile, in this home I had built with my own sweat and tears, I felt for the first time like an outsider who had to be careful with every word and action. I missed my mother terribly, and a lump formed in my throat. If my mother were alive, she would surely have encouraged me, saying, "Don't be sad so quickly. You have to judge a person's true nature over time." But Mom, at that time, I believed my husband's family was my family. I thought if I was kind, Judith would treasure me as a daughter, just as she said in front of others. I learned later that shadows don't fall darkly at your feet from the very beginning. They stretch quietly in light-hearted jokes at the dinner table, in meaningful glances, and only after they have extinguished half the light in the house do they finally reveal their form. Ever since I heard her say, "I'll work on it," I had been living on eggshells even in my own home. It wasn't because my feelings had changed, but because of a wound carved deep into my heart. Even a small cut on your fingertip makes you wary of blades, so what woman could remain unfazed after overhearing the true intentions of someone plotting to take her entire life savings? Still, life went on. In the morning, I went to work. In the evening, I shopped and cooked dinner. Judith continued to sit at the dining table, preparing vegetables, and Silas came home covered in dust from his work clothes. It's probably just a joke old people make. All I have to do is hold my tongue. I tried to comfort myself with that thought. A few days later, on an evening when a heavy rain was pouring over Chicago, I was preparing dinner. It was a spread of pot roast, an omelet, and a simple salad. My 8-year-old daughter, Willa, was coloring at a small table in the living room, while Judith fidgeted, glancing at the clock, and then toward the front door. "Judith, are you expecting someone?" I asked. Judith avoided my gaze. "Oh, Corinne said she might drop by for a bit." Before I could ask more, the intercom buzzed loudly. Silas opened the door. As the door swung open, a gust of cold wind blew in, and with it, his sister, Corinne. She was dragging 2 large suitcases and had a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Behind her stood her 6-year-old son, Leo, clutching a rain-soaked toy robot. Corinne was 34, 4 years younger than Silas. I'd vaguely heard she lived in a small town not far from the city and had recently divorced her husband, but I didn't know the details. Corinne's face was swollen, and her wet bangs were plastered to her forehead, but the first words she threw at me were hardly those of a pitiful victim. "Judith, I'm so sorry to just show up like this. I got divorced and have nowhere to go. I know it's a huge imposition. If I'm a bother, Leo and I will leave right now." Standing in the middle of the kitchen with a spatula in my hand, I couldn't help but scoff. I hadn't said a word, yet she had launched a preemptive strike, painting me as the cruel wife who would turn a mother and child out onto the streets. Judith rushed over and pulled the suitcases into the house. "Oh, you poor thing. Once a woman gets divorced, she goes through nothing but unfairness. This is your brother's home. Who could possibly complain? Don't worry about it, just rest." "Who would complain?" Judith's voice was gentle, but the look she shot me from the corner of her eye was icy. Silas looked at me with a troubled expression. "Alara, Corinne got divorced and just packed up and came here, so she's in a panic. Let's let her stay with us for a little while, just until she gets back on her feet." Hiding behind Silas, I could see Leo, looking around with anxious eyes. Whatever was going on with the adults, what fault did the child have? Thinking of a woman forced out of her home on a rainy night, leading her child by the hand, my own heart softened. I gave a stiff nod. "For now, come in and change out of your wet clothes. Let's talk after you've had some warm food." Without a word of thanks, Corinne just let out a heavy sigh, and as if it were her own room, pulled her suitcases into the small spare room. That night, I gave the spare room to Corinne and her son. I took out the new bedding I had bought when Judith came and made the bed for them. I even prepared a towel, a toothbrush, and a glass of milk for Leo. While Corinne was busy unpacking, I spoke to her gently. "If you need anything else tomorrow, just let me know. Take your time to think about whether you'll look for a preschool for Leo here in Chicago or go back to your town." Sitting on the edge of the bed, Corinne's eyes reddened. "I don't know yet. My ex-husband was a real piece of work. I was practically kicked out with nothing. This child is all I have now." Hearing that, I did feel sorry for her. Even if we weren't going to be best friends, as a woman, I could imagine the misery of a marriage falling apart. I made her a warm glass of milk, and she murmured with her head down, "Thank you, Alara." Until that moment, I thought that adding 1 or 2 more family members to the house wasn't a big deal. I didn't mind cooking a little extra rice, and besides, she was my husband's sister. But what Corinne called a few days stretched into weeks, and then months. For the first 3 days, she helped with housework and watched my reactions. But by the 4th day, she started sleeping in until the afternoon, claiming she had insomnia from the shock. Leo rampaged through the house from the living room to the kitchen, scattering his toys everywhere. His toy robot would bang into the legs of the dining table, and toy cars were left rolling in the middle of the living room floor. One time, while carrying a pot of hot stew, I almost tripped over a plastic block on the floor. I gently told him, "Leo, let's put your toys back in the toy box when you're done, okay? It's very dangerous when the path is blocked." Before Leo could answer, Corinne's shrill voice came from behind a door. "Leo, stop that. You'll get in trouble with your aunt." "Alara, I'm sorry. He's been emotionally unstable since his father left, and he can't even clean up after himself. It's my fault as a mother. But could you please not glare at him so coldly? You're scaring him." I wanted to retort, but I held my tongue. At the dining table, Willa, who was doing her homework, looked up at me. My Willa is a good girl who always puts away her own toys after playing. Yet, in that moment, it seemed like my own quiet daughter was the one who was being made to feel out of place. Since Corinne arrived, our refrigerator had become like an unguarded convenience store. The organic yogurt I bought for Willa would disappear within half a day, and the seasoned ground beef I'd set aside for a weekend meal would be fried up for Leo's late-night snack. One day, I came home after working late and opened the rice cooker to find the rice dug through here and there, and the rice paddle, caked with sticky grains, was left abandoned in the middle of the dining table. Still, I endured. She's in shock from the divorce. I have to be the one to understand. That's what I told myself. But when the end of the month came, the electricity and water bills had jumped by 1.5 times, and the grocery expenses had visibly increased. With my background in accounting, I couldn't miss those numbers. A house that had been home to 3 adults and 1 child was now home to 4 adults and 2 children, so it was natural for expenses to rise. It wasn't about the money, it was about needing even a single word of apology, or some small gesture of wanting to contribute. After dinner, when Judith seemed to be in a good mood, I carefully brought it up. Corinne, I'm not trying to nickel and dime you, but since the number of people has increased, the living expenses and utility bills have gone up quite a bit. Starting next month, could you possibly contribute a little to the household expenses? Any amount is fine. I just mean that we should have clear boundaries. Corinne's hand, which had been peeling an orange for Leo, stopped. She let out a snort. You're saying this knowing I'm divorced, unemployed, and have no money. Oh, I get it. To you, we're just a drain on your precious budget. You're a really cold person. I lowered my voice. I understand your situation, which is why I'm saying the amount doesn't matter, just a small token of good faith. Just then, Judith slammed her cup down on the table. Ilara, I have held my tongue, but now I have to say something. Is it not a pathetic thing to do? Calculating electricity and water bills and presenting them to your own family? Are you telling your sister-in-law, who has sought refuge in her brother's home, to pay rent? Judith, I am not asking her to pay rent. I'm just saying we should maintain a basic level of mutual respect. Respect? You really are quick with your calculations, aren't you? Your money, my money. Aren't you tired of living your life dividing everything into yours and mine? If you're family, you need the grace to embrace things a little. Silas gently squeezed my hand under the table. Hey, Corinne is going through a tough time right now. Let's just help her out for a while. I glared at my husband. A while? How long is a while? My husband avoided my gaze and answered in a barely audible voice. Until Corinne's life stabilizes. Corinne, wiping her hands, shot back in a sharp, resentful voice. It's because we're here that you're so annoyed, isn't it? Fine. I don't want to be a bother to you and my brother, so Leo and I will leave right now. We have nowhere to go, but we'll spend the night on a bench at the train station. Judith flew into a rage and shielded her daughter. What foolishness are you talking about? You have your brother's home, where would you go? As long as I'm alive, no one will throw you out. A hollow laugh rose in my throat. I had never thrown anyone out, never said a single harsh word, yet my one request for a small contribution to living expenses had turned me into the world's most wicked wife. That night, after everyone had gone to their rooms, I was left alone in the kitchen doing the dishes. The water from the sink felt as cold as ice. In the living room, Judith and Corinne were chatting and giggling about something. My husband was just scrolling on his smartphone and didn't help me as he used to. The beige wallpaper, the geranium pot on the narrow balcony. This was the home I had bought with my blood and sweat. Yet I felt like a maid cleaning up after someone else's party had ended. I picked up Leo's plastic spoon that had fallen under the table. The floor was sticky with dried orange juice. As I wiped the floor with a rag, a thought occurred to me. Perhaps the moment I let someone into my home out of pity, I also handed them an opening to look down on me. Since Corinne and her son arrived, the peaceful evenings in our home were shattered into a million pieces. Before, after dinner, Willa would do her homework at her desk. Silas would spread out his blueprints, and I would do the dishes to the rhythmic sound of running water. It wasn't glamorous, but there was order. But now, a loud reality show was always blaring on the living room TV, and Leo would run around, letting out shrieks. Corinne would lie sprawled on the sofa, constantly looking at her smartphone. She'd said she was looking for a job, but at every opportunity, she was watching live shopping streams online. As a sister-in-law, I endured. She's just been through a divorce, I shouldn't push her too hard, I swore to myself. But the more I endured, the more my in-laws began to treat my silence as their right. The real crack began to show at the daily dinner table. Since her daughter's arrival, Judith had taken to occupying the kitchen more and more. At first, I was grateful, thinking she was trying to lighten my burden. But when I saw the food laid out, the distribution of the dishes was truly astounding. The plumpest, most delicious piece of chicken went to Silas. The tenderest parts went into Leo's bowl. The perfectly cooked omelet was swiftly placed in front of Corinne. You need to keep your strength up after the divorce. We can't have you looking exhausted and letting people gossip. As I swallowed my bland mashed potatoes while hearing those words, the term family's home sounded terribly out of place. This house was my house, and most of the grocery money for this table came from my wallet. Yet, in Judith's words, I was a complete outsider, treated like a freeloader. One day, I came home particularly late after finishing month-end closing at work. As I opened the front door, the savory smell of stew and roasting meat filled the air. I was starving, so I quickly took off my coat and headed to the dining table. Judith, Corinne, Leo, and Willa were gathered around, eating. But no matter how much I scanned the table, I couldn't find a plate for me. I stood there, stranded, in the middle of my own dining room. Willa looked up and said in a small voice, "Mom, sit here, next to me. I'll get you a plate." As my child started to get up, Judith snapped curtly. "You said you were working late, so I thought you'd be eating dinner at the office. I can't be expected to prepare a plate for someone who I don't even know when will be back." Somehow suppressing the anger that was welling up, I replied, "I was so busy today I couldn't eat dinner, Judith." Judith didn't even glance at me, instead putting a piece of fish into Leo's mouth. "Then fix it yourself. You're able-bodied. How long do you expect your mother-in-law to wait on you?" Corinne snorted and chimed in. "Alara works at a big company, so I guess she's used to having others prepare everything for her. Look at her, making such a sour face just because one plate wasn't set out for her at home." Wordlessly, I went to the kitchen and took a plate from the cupboard. A cold drop of water from the still damp dish fell onto the back of my hand. I quickly wiped it with my sleeve and sat down next to Willa. But the rice cooker only had some yellowed, burnt rice stuck to the bottom. The fish was just bones, and the stew pot only had a little bit of broth left. Silas finally said, looking guilty, "Hey, should I heat up a frozen pizza for you?" "You knew I hadn't eaten dinner, didn't you?" My husband fell silent. It was just a brief moment of silence, but it squeezed my throat tight. Willa moved the omelet from her plate to mine. "Mom, you eat mine." I quickly moved it back to my child's bowl. "Mommy's not hungry, so Willa, you eat a lot and grow big and strong." It was a blatant lie that I wasn't hungry, but I couldn't bring myself to take that small portion of food from my child, who was witnessing firsthand the adults ganging up to starve her mother. Late that night, after the whole family was asleep, I was standing in the kitchen, microwaving a frozen mac and cheese. Willa came out to the kitchen, hugging her favorite stuffed animal. The child sniffled, watching my face. "Mommy, why didn't Grandma save any dinner for you?" My hand holding the noodle cup stopped. The steam rose and stung my eyes. "It's because Mommy was late coming home, so Grandma must have forgotten." Willa shook her head. I told her, "Mommy's not home yet." But Aunt Corinne said, "It's the late person's fault, so don't worry about it." I quickly turned my face away so my child couldn't see. People often say that children don't understand anything, but the truth is, children are the most sensitive and perceive everything. They just don't know the words to explain the sophisticated malice of adults. From that day on, Judith no longer even bothered to hide her discrimination. The most cramped spot at the corner of the table became my designated seat, while Corinne claimed the prime spot where the fan's breeze hit best. One day, she made a dish with a lot of shrimp, which I'm slightly allergic to. When I gently expressed my discomfort, all hell broke loose. "How many mouths do you think there are in this house? Are you saying I have to cater to your one palate? If you have a complaint, cook for yourself separately. When there are many family members, you have to learn to go with the majority." I laughed in disbelief and retorted, "The majority? I'm already living my life yielding all my rights to follow the majority. But I'm a member of this family too, not an ornament on the wall." Judith slammed her fork down with a loud thud. "Is that any way to talk to your mother-in-law?" I looked her straight in the eye and replied, "I'm just asking for a place at the table and a plate for every person. Is that such a big demand?" Corinne, who was sitting nearby, chimed in. "Alara, you're always lording it over us that this is your house. And frankly, it's really getting on my nerves. Making such a fuss over not getting a little bit of food. You're so petty. You might be a stickler for balancing the books at work, but at home, you just don't want your daughter to see you being pushed around." A cold silence fell over the table. Willa was completely frightened and looked down, while Leo chewed on his meat with sauce smeared around his mouth. Silas threw his fork down and let out a deep sigh. Oh, come on, Alara, stop it. It's just one meal, one plate. What's the big deal? Mom didn't do it on purpose, so just let it go. That one sentence from my husband, she didn't do it on purpose, that light excuse landed like a heavy stone in my chest and pierced me. Once might be a mistake, and twice might be a misunderstanding. But when it happens every day, it is, without a doubt, intentional harassment. So, if you were in a situation where the whole family was gathered, and only your plate was missing, you'd be able to say it's not a big deal? My husband's lips tightened. Judith snorted. How on earth can you put yourself on the same level as me? I am his mother. You are just the wife. You should be showing some respect. My hand tightened around my fork. On the surface, I had called her Judith and treated her politely, but I felt something inside me shatter into a million pieces. I know the hierarchy very well. But how long do I have to eat my meals feeling like an unwanted guest at my own dinner table? I knew I had crossed a line. But when I, who had always been so careful to watch everyone's expressions, finally pushed back, Judith was clearly flustered. She roughly pushed her chair back, shot up, and pointed a finger at my face. This woman daring to lecture her mother-in-law. Listen here. If a woman gets married and doesn't know how to be humble, no matter how grand her house is, it's nothing but a cold tomb. Not to be outdone, I retorted calmly. The house isn't cold because I'm not humble. It's cold because someone is constantly blowing an icy wind at the dinner table. That evening's dinner ended with only the eerie clatter of utensils. We hadn't shouted at each other, but the thick, murky silence was more unbearable than any yelling. Standing in front of the sink, scrubbing the dishes, I felt like my own heart was being scraped away by the sponge. That night, Willa snuggled into my arms and squeezed my hand with her small one. Mommy, when I grow up, I'll make sure to save your dinner for you. I held my child tight. That one sentence from my 8-year-old daughter hurt me more deeply than any adult insult. The greatest wound you can receive from family might not be a slap on the cheek or something thrown at you like in a messy soap opera. It's the deliberate act of not setting out your plate, of portioning out the delicious food to everyone else right in front of your eyes. Such a small, malicious act. Something that others might hear and accuse you of overreacting about a little food. But everyone, when you want to kick someone out of a house, you don't have to pack their bags and throw them out. You just have to make them feel, day after day, down to the marrow of their bones, that they are an unnecessary surplus human being in this house. In the eyes of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, I was no longer family. I was just a troublesome obstacle holding the deed to the condo they wanted to get their hands on. After the plate incident, the atmosphere in the house became overtly cold. Judith no longer even pretended to be nice to me, and Corinne openly avoided me. When I walked through the living room, their hushed conversation would abruptly stop. When I entered the kitchen, I could hear them whispering behind my back again. While they treated me like I was invisible, all my senses were being sharpened as if by a whetstone. It was a sophisticated psychological warfare. On a late Sunday morning, as I was hanging laundry on the balcony, Judith called me. Alara, come over here for a minute. Her tone was the same as always, but the way she sat bolt upright at the dining table was unusual. Silas sat next to her, fiddling with a glass of water with an empty expression, while Corinne leaned back on the sofa, watching me as if an interesting show was about to begin. I pulled out a chair and sat down. Yes, Judith? What is it? Judith stared at me intently and opened her mouth. You said the mortgage on this house is almost paid off, right? Yes, there are about 3 or 4 months left. Judith nodded. Good. I've been thinking long and hard about this, and I think that for a couple to spend their whole lives together, it's only right for the house deed to be in both of their names. Put it in joint tenancy with Silas. I couldn't believe my ears. Excuse me, Judith, what did you just say? Judith repeated clearly and very deliberately. I said, put Silas's name on the deed too. A man is the head of the household, for the house to be only in the wife's name. If outsiders saw that, it would look like my son is just living in his wife's house. It's shameful. Corinne quickly chimed in. That's right, Alara. My brother has been living in this house for years, and it's still just your name on the deed? Honestly, what is my brother? A boarder? At least a renter has some rights. My brother is just a husband in name only. Silas frowned. Corinne, that's enough. But my husband's words stopped right there. He didn't stop his mother from demanding the deed, nor did he defend the fact that this house was my property, bought with my own money before we were married. I took a deep breath. Judith, this condo is a home I bought with my own money long before I married Silas. The down payment and initial costs were from money my late mother gave me, which makes it my separate property under Illinois law. I have never made Silas feel unwelcome here. But the deed will remain firmly in my name. Judith snorted. Is there such a thing as your house and my house between a husband and wife? A couple who divides everything up so neatly isn't a couple. They're business partners. Just because we have financial boundaries doesn't mean we're not a family. In fact, isn't it better to keep things clear so there are no resentments later on? Judith slammed the table. I can't believe you have the nerve to lecture me about the law in my own son's house. It gives me chills. In my day, when a woman got married, she devoted her life to her husband's family. But women these days, just because they earn a little money, all they talk about is separate property and marital property. It's ridiculous. I looked straight at Silas. Do you think so too? Do you think you're just a boarder in this house? Silas put down his glass. No, I've never thought that way. Then why are you staying silent when your mother and sister are being so unreasonable? Silas looked down. Well, Mom isn't completely wrong. A lot of couples have joint tenancy. It's not like we're giving the deed to a stranger. I'm your husband, right? Those words pierced my heart like a cold blade. I asked, enunciating each word. For you to be my husband, does your name have to be on that deed? Can't you live with just the bond of trust between us? Silas just bit his lip, and Judith immediately jumped in. Look at this. The mother-in-law says one thing, and she corners her own husband like a prosecutor. It's only because Silas is a gentleman that he puts up with you. Any other husband would have flipped the table by now. Corinne clicked her tongue. Maybe it's because she's in accounting? She looks at people like they're items on a balance sheet. It seems my brother is just considered miscellaneous expenses. In the past, I would have kept it to myself. But that day, I had to draw the line clearly. Corinne, it's precisely because I'm in accounting that I can distinguish between my hard-earned assets and someone else's greed. While you've been living here rent-free, I haven't received a single penny from you. While I've been cooking for your mother, I've never once asked for grocery money. Just because I don't send you an invoice doesn't mean I'm a fool. Corinne jumped to her feet. Are you saying now that my son and I are thieves trying to steal your house? Those are your words, not mine. Corinne's face turned beet red, and Judith pointed a finger at me. Are you getting cocky now just because you're holding on to a single piece of paper? This household has my son and your in-laws in it. You have to learn to go with the majority. If the majority means swallowing an individual's personal property, soaked in their blood and sweat, then I cannot follow that majority. The room fell silent, as if doused with water. Only the sound of the wind hitting the balcony window was eerie. Silas covered his face with his hands and said nervously, Oh, Alara, just stop it. Mom just said it because she wants us to get along. Why do you always have to take things to the extreme? Looking at my husband, I heard the sound of a thread snapping deep inside my heart. So if I don't break, I become the witch who destroys the family. If I don't complain and agree to joint tenancy, we become a harmonious family. Silas didn't answer. My husband's pathetic silence was far more terrifying than Judith's yelling. A mother-in-law may be a stranger, but my husband had to be on my side. He should have known that this condo was not just a concrete block, but my youth, gathered by working day and night, the last love left to me by my late mother, and the final fortress for my daughter, Willa, to grow up proudly without having to read other people's faces. After that huge fight, I neatly organized all the important documents in the house. The deed, the purchase agreement, the bank's mortgage payment statements, and even the bank transaction records showing my mother's transfer to me. I put everything in a clear file and locked it deep inside the safe in my bedroom. I also changed the safe's combination, took a picture of each document, and backed them up to my personal cloud and email. I didn't want to suspect my own family, but having witnessed the blatant greed in their eyes, I couldn't just stand by like a fool. After that, Judith and Corinne didn't even show a hint of false kindness. A cold wind blew at the dinner table, and sarcastic remarks flew at every opportunity. Corinne, passing by the bedroom safe, snorted and said, I wonder if she's hiding gold bars in there. Such tight security. It's because my blood and sweat are in there, I replied. At my response, Judith clicked her tongue pointedly. Young people these days think a piece of paper is heavier than family ties. I didn't answer further. It was like telling a robber who was openly demanding my belongings that I was clutching my wallet tightly. That night, I opened the safe and checked the documents again. Under the orange glow of the lamp, the deed looked like just a crisp piece of paper. But I know. This single piece of paper is the only shield that allows me and my daughter Willa to stretch our legs and sleep soundly in this harsh world. And at that moment, I was certain. Not everyone becomes family to create a warm home. They were just waiting for an opportunity, for a moment when I let my guard down, to snatch the keys clutched in my hand. That month, a major closing period at work rushed in. I left home before dawn every day and came home late at night with bloodshot eyes from staring at a monitor. The housework, cooking and cleaning, which had exploded since Corinne and her son joined, weighed on my shoulders like a year-end audit report. I suggested to Silas that we hire a part-time housekeeper. He readily agreed, but Judith was vehemently opposed. There are 3 able-bodied women in this house, and you want to hire a housekeeper? The neighbors will laugh at us. In my day, I did farm work and raised 3 children with my own 2 hands. I said softly but firmly, "Yes, I know you went through a lot in the past, Judith. That's precisely why I want to avoid everyone collapsing from exhaustion now. We'll just have someone come a few days a week." Corinne, who was lying on the sofa engrossed in her smartphone, muttered, "If Alara is paying for it, then go ahead and hire someone. I don't have any money." It wasn't even worth retorting. Arguing with her would only tire me out. A few days later, a 58-year-old woman named Mrs. Albright, originally from West Virginia, came through a referral. She was petite with slightly tanned skin and some gray hair, but she spoke in a very calm and gentle manner. She said she had lost her husband early and was making a living as a housekeeper in Chicago to support her son who was working far away. As soon as she entered the house, Mrs. Albright offered a warm smile and greeted each family member, even wiping her shoes carefully on the welcome mat before stepping in. "Ma'am, please don't hesitate to tell me what you need. I'm used to working in homes with children. I'll take responsibility for keeping your children's things neat and separate." I felt a strange sense of relief at her words. Mrs. Albright was not a person of empty words. After wiping the gas stove, she would double-check the stubborn stains in the corners of the sink, and she carefully washed Willa's white blouses separately from the dark clothes to prevent them from mixing. Willa also took a great liking to Mrs. Albright. When she came home from school, she would be the first to run up to her and chatter away. "Mrs. Albright, I got a 100 on my spelling test today." Mrs. Albright's wrinkled face would break into a wide smile. "Oh my, what a clever girl. A child who can write neatly at a young age will be thorough in everything when she grows up." That unpolished but heartfelt compliment, so reminiscent of my late mother, sometimes made my nose sting. On the other hand, Corinne had it out for Mrs. Albright from day one. As Mrs. Albright was wiping the living room table, Corinne said irritably, "Hey, wipe a little more gently. It's not like it's yours. What are you doing, scrubbing it so hard?" Mrs. Albright silently stopped her rag and nodded apologetically. "Yes, I'll be more careful." One day, when Mrs. Albright was gently telling Leo to put away the toys he had scattered, Corinne flew into a rage. "Your job is just to clean. I'll handle my son's education. Don't interfere with other people's children." When I started to step in, Mrs. Albright gestured for me to stay quiet. When I quietly took her side, saying, "Corinne," she was probably just worried Leo might trip over his toys. Corinne snorted in disbelief. "Having an outsider in the house feels like being under surveillance 24/7. I hate it." Those words stuck in my ear. People who have nothing to hide don't fear the gaze of others, but I didn't yet realize the true meaning of those words at the time. One Saturday afternoon, while I was checking inventory at the office, I got a frantic, nervous call from Corinne. "Alara, you need to come home right now. My gold necklace is missing from the house." I rushed into a taxi and arrived home to a scene of chaos. Standing in the middle of the living room, Corinne had her eyes blazing as she pointed a finger at Mrs. Albright, who stood by the shoe rack at the entrance, her face pale and her hands trembling uncontrollably. Judith stood with her arms crossed, spitting out coldly. The 8-carat gold necklace Corinne had in her purse has vanished without a trace. The only outsider in the house was this woman. Putting down my bag, I asked as calmly as possible, "Corinne, are you sure you put it in your purse?" Corinne shrieked, "You think I don't know where my own things are? I put it in my purse this morning to wear out, and now it's completely gone. That was a very expensive piece." Judith looked at me and chimed in, "Alara, what I'm saying is, when an outsider's hand is involved, you have to be firm. I'm not saying this to be mean. If you don't, it will lead to bigger trouble later." "Ma'am, open your bag right now." Mrs. Albright pleaded in a tearful voice. "Ma'am, I really didn't take it. I may have lived a poor life, but I have never once laid a hand on someone else's belongings." Corinne sneered. "Does a thief walk around with I'm a thief written on their forehead? If you have nothing to hide, open your bag. I stood in front of Mrs. Albright, blocking them. We can't just rummage through someone's bag without any clear evidence. If we really can't find it, I'll check the security camera I have set up in the living room. If it's still not found after that, I'll call the police. Corinne's eyes widened. Are you taking the side of a stranger over your own sister-in-law? I'm on the side of facts and fairness. If someone were to falsely accuse you of being a thief, I would stand up for you in the same way. Judith slapped the sofa. There's a thief in the house, and this woman does nothing but make excuses. This is why I said not to let strangers into the house. Without retorting, I took out my smartphone and opened the camera app. It was a small camera I had set up in case Willa was ever in the living room alone. It had blind spots, but I could generally see what was happening in the living room. As I rewound the footage, I saw a scene from around noon where Leo was rummaging through Corinne's purse, looking for candy. A moment later, something shiny was clutched in the child's hand, and Leo ran with it toward the shoe rack at the entrance. I knelt down to Leo's eye level and asked gently, Leo, can you tell me honestly? Earlier, did you take a gold necklace out of Mommy's purse to play with? The child glanced at Corinne's face and answered in a barely audible voice. I thought it was a magic necklace that the robot uses to transform, so I played with it for a bit and put it inside the shoe rack. The blood drained from Corinne's face. I opened the shoe rack, and when I turned over Leo's small sneaker, a crumpled gold necklace fell to the floor with a soft thud. The house became dead silent. Mrs. Albright clutched her chest, shedding silent tears without making a sound. I picked up the necklace and handed it to Corinne. Here, it wasn't Mrs. Albright who took your things, was it? Corinne nervously snatched the necklace and mumbled, Why are you getting so worked up over a child's prank? I was just surprised because I thought I'd lost it. Were you just surprised? Or did you corner her from the start, deciding she was a thief? Corinne turned her face away with a huff. Card apology. Wasn't it basic human decency to say I'm sorry, even as a formality? But Judith just cleared her throat. When you live under one roof, misunderstandings happen. You won't hold a grudge, will you, ma'am? Mrs. Albright looked down, shaking her head slightly. No, I won't mind. But Mrs. Albright's hands were still trembling. For a poor person, the most miserable thing is not physical exhaustion, but the injustice of being treated like a thief. Why couldn't they understand that a carelessly thrown word of suspicion can weigh more heavily on a person's back than a sack of rice? Late that evening, Mrs. Albright approached me and quietly offered her resignation. Ma'am, Willa and you are truly good people, but I can't work here anymore. My pride won't allow me to work while being treated like a thief. I gripped Mrs. Albright's rough hands tightly. Mrs. Albright, please, just a few more days. I know better than anyone how unfairly you were treated. If you quit like this, I'll be very upset too. I'll have a firm word with Judith and Corinne. Mrs. Albright looked at me for a moment and then shook her head, her voice very small. It's true that I was going to quit, but I'm thinking of you, ma'am. There's something very wrong in this house. A kind, gentle person like you. If you stay among people who are always calculating with such sharp eyes, they'll bleed you dry. Please believe that I'm not trying to stay for the money. I was at a loss for words. Mrs. Albright's voice was small, but it had the solid ring of an iron block. Ma'am, they say if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, right? But if you're thrown into a viper's nest, even if you're innocent, you'll just end up being bitten to death. The house deed, your child, and even your reputation, they'll go after everything. That mother-in-law and sister-in-law are not to be underestimated. Those words created a huge ripple in my heart, like a large rock dropped into a quiet pond. That night, Corinne sat next to Judith, watching a drama and laughing as if nothing had happened. When Silas came home and heard a rough account of what had happened, he said dismissively, If they found it, then it's fine. Corinne just misspoke because she was surprised. You don't have to be so neurotic about every little thing. If we didn't have the camera, we would have gone through Mrs. Albright's bag, branded her a thief, and thrown her out. Would that still be just misspoke? Silas's lips tightened. It was that same frustrating silence again. The silence that was like a lid, covering up the essence of the problem. But I didn't press him further. From that day on, every glance from Corinne, every hushed whisper from Judith, every footstep that lingered in front of my bedroom, my senses were sharpened to a razor's edge. Thankfully, Mrs. Albright stayed, and Willa continued to trail after her apron, chatting away. In the midst of this suffocating, hostile in-law family, I felt a mix of sadness and gratitude that the only person who gave me heartfelt advice was a complete stranger, not related by a single drop of blood. Thanks to Mrs. Albright staying, a strange tension hung in the air. Corinne could no longer openly look down on Mrs. Albright, but her eyes held a venomous glint whenever she looked at her. Judith also spoke less around Mrs. Albright. The fact that there was another objective observer in the small condo seemed to be a considerable pressure for them. Meanwhile, around that time, Silas started acting noticeably strange. Before, no matter how much dust he came home covered in from the construction site, he would look over Willa's homework and at least have a bite of a warm meal. But recently, he started coming home after 9 p.m., more often than not. His face was ashen, and the dark circles under his eyes stretched down to his jaw. One day, I saw him standing frozen in the hallway, having half opened the front door, staring at his smartphone with his hand trembling for over a minute. "What's wrong? Why are you just standing there?" I asked. My husband hastily took off his shoes, avoiding my eyes. "Oh, it's nothing. Just a delay in a materials delivery. It's giving me a headache. I've been in accounting for 10 years. I can spot a discrepancy in a ledger like a hawk, but a wife's intuition is faster and more sensitive at detecting the flicker in a person's eyes." Silas's eyes were not those of a breadwinner simply tired from work. They were the eyes of someone terrified, trying to hide a massive sinkhole that had opened up at his feet. The money he gave me for living expenses also gradually decreased. Last month, he gave me $1,000, but this month, it was only $500. This is barely enough to cover Willa's tutoring and groceries. Are material payments really that backed up lately? Silas's brow furrowed nervously. Just cover it with your money for now. I'll pay you back in a few days. Do you think I'm saying this because I'm trying to skimp on my own child's education? My husband's defensive attitude made my heart sink. A husband and wife are supposed to be people who can huddle together over the same budget, but I was suddenly being treated like a cold-hearted creditor demanding payment. It was one night in late June. I woke up to find the spot next to me empty. Silas was gone. The wall clock showed it was just past midnight. I went out to the living room and saw that the glass door to the balcony was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could hear Silas, with his back to me, talking on the phone in a very low voice. I know. Stop cornering me. I'm barely keeping things afloat as it is. Don't you dare threaten to come to my house." Through the open gap, the smell of cigarette smoke wafted in with the cold night air. Silas didn't usually smoke, but on the balcony floor, there were already 2 cigarette butts crushed out. The voice on the other end of the line was a woman's. I couldn't make out the exact words, but it was clear that the tone was nervous and sharp. Silas pleaded desperately. "Rochelle, just give me a few more days, please." Rochelle. That name pierced my ears like a shard of ice. The next morning, as he was putting on his tie, I asked him directly, "Who is Rochelle?" My husband's hands stopped. "Huh? Rochelle? Oh, she's the president of a materials supplier I work with." Why would the president of a materials supplier threaten to come to your house in the middle of the night? Why were you groveling to her on the phone, begging for more time? Silas suddenly stood up, his voice filled with irritation. "Did you eavesdrop on my phone call?" A laugh escaped me. It was a dry laugh, born more of disbelief than anger. "Eavesdrop? You were whispering on our balcony in the middle of the night. It would be stranger if I didn't hear you. Do you want me to pretend I'm deaf and play the part of the understanding wife?" Silas rubbed his face roughly. "Alara, I'm really at my wit's end. So please, don't ask any more questions." I stared at him. The image of the straightforward man who had brought me warm soup after work was gone. In his place stood a stranger who was building a sturdy wall in front of my face. I didn't try to force the wall down. Instead, I decided to take a step back and quietly watch what was hidden behind it. A few days later, as I was putting his dirty work clothes into the washing machine, I found a crumpled piece of a receipt in his pocket. On it was a scrawled note. Vince. Materials debt. $200,000. The number $200,000 was circled in red pen, and below it was written, Rochelle minus $120K, external minus $80K. My heart started to pound. I didn't have a habit of secretly going through my husband's pockets, but when the truth tumbles to your feet, you can't just turn away. I took a picture of the paper and put it back where I found it. That night, after dinner, when Willa was in her room and my in-laws were watching TV in the living room, I called Silas out to the balcony. "You need to tell me everything, honestly." "Tell you what? What are you talking about?" My husband's face went pale. "Don't play dumb. I saw that memo. The one from your pocket. What is this $200,000? Silas, like a cornered animal, started breathing heavily and collapsed into a plastic chair. I started a big joint venture with this guy, Vince, for a materials supply deal. He said the profit margins were insane, so I stretched myself thin to get the funds. I wanted to make a big score, send Willa to a better school, maybe even buy a car. And Vince ran off with the money? I asked. Silas nodded. He disappeared. The deliveries fell through, and the collectors for the principal and interest on the loans are calling me every day. I'm sitting on a $200,000 mountain of debt right now. I had expected it, but hearing that terrifying amount out loud made my ears ring. You took on a $200,000 debt without a single word of consultation with me? Silas stared at the floor and offered a feeble excuse. I knew you'd be against it if you knew. My pride wouldn't let me look like an incompetent provider. The excuse was so foolish it was laughable. Why are there so many men in this world whose pride won't allow them to consult their wives, but they have no problem jumping headfirst into a pit of fire? And then, after getting burned, they resentfully ask why no one stopped them. It was pathetic. Trying my best not to lose my reason, I lowered my voice. So, what's this $120,000 you borrowed from this woman, Rochelle? My husband's eyes darted around as he stammered. She's just a materials supplier, but she said she had some cash she could float me, so I took it in a hurry. And the other $80,000? From external sources? Where is that from? Payday loans? Loan sharks? My husband was silent. That silence was the answer. From the living room, I could hear Corinne's cackles as she watched a reality show, while on the balcony, the ground beneath my feet felt like it was crumbling into a bottomless abyss. Silas, if you had failed in business, you could have confessed to me from the start, and we could have put our heads together to find a solution. But you deceived your wife, took out money from loan sharks, and on top of that, you're being threatened by another woman in the middle of the night. What exactly do you think I am in this house? My husband grabbed my hand tightly. I was wrong. I'm just so lost right now. Alara, just this once, please. Just help me this one time. I coldly shook his hand off. Help you? How? Silas couldn't answer right away and glanced toward his mother sitting in the living room. It was just a single glance, but it sent a shiver down my spine. That night, as Silas slept, the screen of his smartphone, which was on the bedside table, lit up. The name that popped up was Rochelle. Silas, you promised you would end things and start over with me. Are you trying to back out now? If you don't get the money right away, I'm coming to your condo, and I'll tell your wife everything to her face. Be prepared. I couldn't even breathe until the screen went dark again. End things and start over. That phrase stuck in my throat like a fishbone, tearing at me. What was he ending? And with whom was he starting over? Lying next to Silas, staring at the ceiling, I remembered my mother's voice. What's scarier than losing money is a husband deceiving his wife. You can always earn money back, but you can't glue a broken trust back together. It wasn't yet clear whether this woman, Rochelle, was just a vicious creditor or a cunning fox having an affair with my husband. But what was certain was that behind that $200,000 debt was a tangled mess of my husband's pride, lies, infidelity, and a dirty secret that thoroughly deceived me. After that night, when I confirmed Silas's $200,000 debt and the message hinting at an affair, I did not go on a rampage, tearing the house apart. My heart was breaking, and I felt like crying tears of blood, but I held back. Because in this house, there were too many hyenas eagerly waiting for me to fall apart. If I lost my reason here and threw a tantrum, it was clear that the anger would just boomerang back and stab me. As usual, I woke up early, fed Willa breakfast, and left for work with a cheerful face. But my eyes had begun to observe everything sharply. Silas changed his smartphone's passcode. Before, he would leave it casually on the dining table for Willa to play cartoon theme songs. But now, he clutched it to his chest even when he went to the bathroom. During dinner, when his phone rang and his face changed after a glance at the screen, he quickly flipped it over. Corinne, sitting opposite him, smirked and said sarcastically, "My brother seems awfully busy these days. It's like a call center." "Who was that?" I asked nonchalantly. Silas avoided my gaze. "Oh, just the site foreman." Judith quickly placed a piece of omelet on Silas's plate and scolded, "When a man is out making money, he's bound to have a thing or two that's stressful. Let him rest a little at home. If the wife nags him about every little thing, how is a husband supposed to breathe?" I put down my fork and said in a clear tone, "Judith, it was just one phone call. If just asking who it was is enough to make him suffocate, then he was probably already having trouble breathing." Silas's eyebrow twitched. "Alara, your thorny words are getting on my nerves. Stop it." Looking at him, I felt a wave of both pity and disgust. It was like watching someone hug a cactus, bleeding profusely, but unable to let go. The next night, I heard Silas on the phone on the balcony again. I hid behind the curtain and listened. Rochelle, please. Coming to the house in the middle of the night is crazy. I haven't told Alara everything yet. Stop threatening me with that all the time. When did I ever make a 100% promise to you? Stop exaggerating. My blood ran cold. That? What is that? At the breakfast table, I slammed a glass of cold water down in front of Silas. Tell me clearly, what is your relationship with this Rochelle woman? My husband, about to take a drink of water, froze. I told you. She's a business associate and my creditor. What kind of creditor threatens to come to your house in the middle of the night and talks about ending things and starting over? What did you promise that woman? Silas suddenly flew into a rage. Are you really that paranoid? When you're out in the world, you have complicated relationships. Why are you so desperate to connect everything to an affair? Are you trying to drive me crazy? I snorted. Hiding a $200,000 debt from your wife and meeting with another woman, what kind of social life is that in what world? What's driving you crazy is the mess you made, not me. Silas was speechless, his face turning red and then pale. Judith, coming out of the kitchen, went on the offensive. A clever woman knows how to protect her husband's pride first. Silas is already sitting on a mountain of debt, his heart burning to a crisp, and you're rubbing salt in the wound. Does that make you feel better? Corinne also chimed in. Isn't it because Alara is cornering my brother that he's looking for comfort elsewhere? It's a known fact that when a wife is a nag, a husband will stray. Alara, you're gaslighting him. I glared straight at Corinne and shot back. Gaslighting is a form of abuse that comes from lies and deceit. If asking for the facts is gaslighting, then every journalist in the world is a criminal. Silas kicked his chair back and shot up. I'm going to work. As he walked toward the front door, I asked his retreating back, Are you going to work? Or are you going to see Rochelle? Silas turned back to me with bloodshot eyes, slammed the front door, and left. A heavy silence fell over the living room. I came home earlier than usual to find Silas sitting on the bed, clutching his smartphone. The moment he saw me, he flinched and his hand quickly turned off the screen. I didn't ask anything. Questioning is something you do when you still have hope. Silence is sometimes not defeat, but the most terrifying weapon to quietly observe how low your opponent will sink. Willa tugged at the hem of my pants and whispered in a small voice, Mommy, Daddy looks sad. Stroking my child's head, I swallowed tears of blood in my heart. Daddy's not sad, sweetie. He's just desperate to hide something. That night, we slept with our backs to each other. The distance between us on the bed was only a hand's breadth, but the distance in our hearts was already as far as the opposite banks of a flooding river. A few days later, on a weekend, I took Willa to her art class at the community center and came home. Before I even opened the door, I heard Judith's hushed but irritated voice seeping out from the living room. You idiot! How long did you think you could hide a $200,000 debt? I held my breath outside the door. Silas's worn-out voice followed. I'm at my wit's end, Mom. I just can't see a way out. Just then, Corinne interjected sharply. What do you mean there's no way out? You have a huge lifeline right there called a condo in Chicago. Just have Alara co-sign a home equity loan on this place. Take out a huge loan, pay off that Rochelle woman and the urgent debts, and then you can slowly pay it back. In that moment, I felt the blood drain from my entire body. A $200,000 debt. Silas hadn't confessed to me, his wife, first. He had already told his mother and sister everything, and in their eyes, I was not a family member to be respected, but a walking ATM to pay off Silas's debt, a mere collateral for a loan. I threw the door open and walked in. The three of them clammed up as if on cue. Judith was startled but quickly changed her expression. Oh, you're back. Go wash your hands and have something to eat. I stared at Silas until I thought I would burn a hole through him. How long were you planning to hide this? Silas looked down deeply, and Corinne crossed her arms and launched in. Well, it's convenient that you overheard. We were just about to consult you on this matter. If you just sign the home equity loan documents, we can save my brother. Save your brother? Or are you trying to blow up my entire life savings? Judith frowned. Alara, a husband and wife are one body. You're supposed to support each other in times of trouble. If Silas goes down, what will happen to you and Willa? In a family crisis, how can you be so fixated on a cold piece of paper like a deed? Don't you have a warm heart that cares about family? One body. What a convenient phrase. When he was racking up debt behind my back, he acted like a stranger. But now that it's time to pay it back, Why does my house suddenly become public property? That evening, dinner was laid out, but no one picked up their forks. Instead of a bowl, Corinne slammed a blue clear file onto the middle of the dining table. The cover read, Home Equity Loan Agreement. The audacity of it made me laugh out loud. How could they push a person off a cliff and then disguise it as a warm, family rescue mission? Corinne slid the file in front of me. Read it over. A loan consultant I know said the paperwork isn't complicated. If you just provide your consent form and proof of identity, the bank will transfer $200,000 right away. We can pay off Rochelle's $120,000 first and use the rest to clear up the smaller debts. Then my brother won't have to go to jail right now. I flipped through the documents. Application form, debt security agreement, power of attorney. They had even kindly highlighted the places where I needed to sign with a fluorescent pen. Who prepared all this? Corinne answered smugly. A financial consultant friend of mine helped out, so don't worry about the fees. I looked at Silas. Bring me all the documents proving when the debt was incurred, the interest rates, the original loan agreements, and a detailed statement showing exactly where that money was spent. Until I've reviewed all of that, I will absolutely not sign. Silas stammered, flustered. The documents are all scattered around right now. It'll take a few days to get them, and Rochelle is threatening to show up tomorrow. Please, just sign it first. I slammed the file on the table. Are you kidding me? You want me to put up my entire life savings as collateral without even clarifying the source of the debt? Judith slammed the table so hard that water sloshed out of her glass. The head of the household is about to collapse, and you're sitting here calculating interest rates? You heartless, shameless woman. Will you be satisfied when he's hounded by debt collectors and thrown out on the street? Corinne's eyes widened as she joined in. Alara, you're really horrible. If you stubbornly protect your house, my mother and brother won't be able to show their faces in the neighborhood. I bet you'll be so warm and happy living all alone, hugging your one condo. I shot a sharp glare at Corinne. At least my condo doesn't hide a $200,000 debt from me. Silas shot up from his chair and yelled, Alara! Without blinking, I said back to him, Don't raise your voice and say my name as if I'm the one who caused this. I have one question for you. If I sign this, and we can't pay back the loan and the bank forecloses on this house, Willa and I will be out on the street. Do you have a plan for that? Silas's lips moved, but not a single word came out. Judith snorted. Look at her, pouring cold water on everything with her selfish assumptions. You're a selfish woman who only thinks about saving her own skin until the very end. I replied calmly, I have to think about saving my own skin, don't I? Because in this house, there isn't a single person who is worried about me and Willa. In the suffocating silence, I saw a shadow flickering behind the door to the room. It was the small, trembling shadow of my child. The moment I saw that shadow, any thin shred of pity or final sympathy for my husband completely evaporated. I could not, even if it meant carving up my own flesh, throw my daughter's only refuge into the greedy mouths of those people. I'm not saying I'll pretend I don't know about your debt. We can find a way to pay it back together, whether you declare bankruptcy, sell your car, or take on multiple part-time jobs. But I cannot exchange my daughter's home, which I prepared with my own blood and sweat, for your dirty lies. I will act. Judith screamed a curse at me. You've sealed your own fate today. When the debt collectors show up and wreak havoc in front of your daughter, don't you come crying to me? Everyone, if you were in my position, what would you have done? A husband's $200,000 debt, shrouded in lies, and my one and only child in this dark nest. Would you have signed those papers? That night, I pushed the documents on the dining table back in front of Corinne and declared, absolutely not. Corinne's eyes blazed. Alara, are you out of your mind? She spat. Silas grabbed my wrist tightly and pleaded, Alara, I'll work as a day laborer for the rest of my life to pay it all back, I promise. Just this once. But what could be lighter than the promise of a lifetime from a man who lies as a matter of course? I shook his hand off. If you really need my help, then start by telling me the whole truth. Otherwise, if all you need is my condo as collateral, then you're not seeing me as your wife. I went into Willa's room. She was in the corner of her bed, hugging her stuffed animal, on the verge of tears. Mommy, are they going to take our house away? I held my child tight. No, sweetie, Mommy will protect our home with her life. Don't worry. That night, my marriage crossed the Rubicon. That blue file on the dining table, it wasn't a document to pay off a debt. It was a terrifying trap disguised in the name of family. After I refused to sign, the house became quiet on the surface, but underneath, it was as cold as ice. Judith didn't shout openly anymore, but she would constantly complain about the stew being too salty or the floor being dirty. It was a method of slowly strangling me by attacking me from the periphery rather than directly. Corinne would make sarcastic remarks loud enough for me to hear at every opportunity. I wonder if women these days are fine as long as their own deed is safe, even if their husband is on the verge of death. It's so scary I don't even want to get married. I didn't retort. Rolling around in the mud with a mad dog would only get my own clothes dirty. But 3 days later, around my lunch break, I got a frantic message from Mrs. Albright. "Ma'am, can you call me? I'm hiding in the bathroom sending this message." When I called, I heard Mrs. Albright's trembling voice. "Ma'am, I saw Corinne sneak into your bedroom and rummage through your drawers. She was about to come out with a stack of papers that looked like copies of your ID and other official documents when she ran into me. She made an excuse that she was looking for Leo's preschool papers and got confused. But I saw it clearly. It was a document with your name on it." My heart went cold. "Mrs. Albright, pretend you didn't see anything. I'll come home early today and check." All afternoon, the numbers on my monitor seemed to dance. I had put the original deed, the transfer statements from my mother, and my social security card and passport in a new safe I'd bought a few days ago. But there were still some miscellaneous documents left in the drawer, like copies of my ID and the condo's purchase agreement. They weren't enough to take out a loan, but I didn't know what kind of mischief they were planning. That evening, I prepared dinner with a calm face and waited until the family had finished eating. Then I went into my room and locked the door. When I opened the document drawer, there were clear signs that someone had been through it. The order of the blue and yellow files was switched, and the direction of the paper clips was slightly off. There was no way a 10-year veteran of the accounting department would miss such a minute discrepancy. I opened the safe and only let out a sigh of relief after confirming that the originals were safe. That night, I asked Silas, "Corinne went through my drawers today. Why on earth did she touch my personal documents?" Silas frowned. "Oh, she said she was looking for Leo's preschool papers and made a mistake. Why do you always have to treat people like thieves? It's not like the sky will fall just because one document is stolen." I laughed in disbelief. "If I wait until my whole house is stolen to call them thieves, won't it be too late then?" Silas turned over with a huff, as if he didn't want to talk anymore. Looking at my husband's irresponsible back, I made a decision. Late that night, I sent a message to my old friend Rebecca. We were close in college, and she now works as a lawyer specializing in divorce and family law. Rebecca's reply was concise but clear. "Do not sign any documents, under any circumstances. Back up all your evidence to the cloud. If anyone tries to use your name or documents, or threatens you, be sure to record it. Your house is your separate property, so they can't touch it without your consent." That night, I found some comfort in the fact that I wasn't alone. The house was full of enemies, but the law and reason of the outside world were still on my side. Around 1 a.m., I heard the sound of slippers shuffling in the hallway. Through the gap under the door, I saw Corinne's shadow pass by. I didn't open the door, just held my breath and waited. This house was no longer a sweet home. It had become the middle of a survival game where if you closed your eyes, you'd get your nose cut off. After the document incident, I slept lightly every night. Just the sound of footsteps in the living room would jolt me awake. They say a living person's greed is scarier than any ghost, and the schemes my in-laws were concocting to steal my property were beyond imagination. I started bringing my personal water bottle into my bedroom. I absolutely did not drink any beverage or water that others gave me. Why? It was thanks to a warning from Mrs. Albright. One day, in a corner of the kitchen, Mrs. Albright gently tugged on my sleeve and whispered, "Ma'am." A few days ago, when I was cleaning Corinne's room, I found an empty box about the size of my palm in her trash can. It said, "Miniature spy camera." She said she was using it for her online shopping live streams, but why would a woman who does live streams secretly buy a camera the size of a fingernail? It's a dangerous world these days, so even inside the house, be careful to lock your doors and don't drink anything others give you. The moment I heard those words, my hair stood on end. A miniature camera, blackmail, a loan, the scattered puzzle pieces were coming together to form a terrifying picture. A few days before, despite all the shouting about money, Silas came home with a pudding that Willa liked and said gently, "Alara, I've been pushing you too hard. I'm sorry. I'll figure out the loan situation somewhere else, so don't stress too much." A normal woman might have been moved by her husband's apology, but when a man being hounded for $200,000 suddenly acts so relaxed, it means one of two things. He has either given up, or he is hiding a knife behind his back. The full extent of the incident was later revealed through Mrs. Albright's testimony and the police investigation. The architect of this entire demonic plan was my sister-in-law, Corinne. She had seen that I strongly suspected an affair between Rochelle and Silas. She decided to use a woman's blind spot: jealousy and anger. Corinne secretly took Silas's phone and sent a message to Rochelle. "Come to the condo on Friday afternoon. Let's settle this quietly without my wife knowing and start over again." Rochelle, desperate to get her $120,000 back, thought Silas was finally going to resolve the issue and took the bait. And so, on that fateful Friday afternoon, a day when I had a closing meeting with a client at my office until 6 p.m., I had asked Mrs. Albright to pick up Willa from school around 4 p.m. To my in-laws, I was a person who wouldn't be home until 7 p.m. at the earliest. They were meticulous. Around 3 p.m., as soon as Rochelle arrived, Judith greeted her from a distance, saying, "Thank you for coming," and offered her a glass of orange juice. It was later found in a hospital blood test that the juice was mixed with a sleeping aid and an anti-anxiety drug. Silas had already drunk several strong drinks that Judith had given him, and was not in his right mind. Rochelle, deceived by Corinne's words to discuss the debt settlement with Silas alone, entered the bedroom. At that moment, Corinne, saying she would charge Rochelle's phone for her, snatched it and shoved it into her own bag. She then herded the drugged and staggering Rochelle and the drunken, passed-out Silas into the bedroom and locked the door from the outside. The most chilling part was the miniature camera Corinne had hidden behind a tissue box on the bedroom TV stand. The camera was not aimed at the bed, but at the bedroom door. Why? Because what they wanted was not a scene of an affair, but the image of me, bursting through the door, my eyes bloodshot with rage, grabbing Rochelle's hair, and assaulting Silas, while screaming obscenities, the image of a woman who had lost her reason. They calculated that if they captured that footage and threatened to spread it online and on my company's bulletin board, I, a person who values my reputation, would meekly sign the home equity loan documents. But as they say, heaven helps those who help themselves. On Friday afternoon at 3 p.m., a sudden car accident involving a director from my client's company caused my entire meeting to be canceled. My team members cheered, and my boss, patting my back, told everyone, "You've all worked hard this week. Go home early." I was thrilled at the thought of being able to go home while it was still light out for the first time in a while. I bought some pork and vegetables that Willa likes and headed home, humming a tune. At 4:30 p.m., the building manager on the first floor of my condo building in the South Loop looked at me with wide eyes. "Oh, Mrs. Miller, why are you home so early today?" My meeting was canceled, so I thought I'd have an early dinner with my daughter, Willa. After a brief greeting, I went up to the 12th floor. When I opened the electronic lock and entered the front door, the house was suffocatingly quiet. Normally, I would hear the sound of the TV or Leo's shrieks, but it was too quiet. On the living room table, there were 3 half-empty glasses of orange juice, and a mixture of stale alcohol, perfume, and a strange medicinal smell hung in the air. Judith and Corinne's coats were hanging by the door, and their purses were on the console table. "Judith? Silas?" No answer. Just then, I heard a very strange sound from the bedroom. It was like an animal breathing heavily, and a woman's muffled moan. "Help me, please." In that instant, my reason snapped. The terrifying image of my husband rolling around in our bedroom with that mistress, Rochelle, filled my head. I threw down my grocery bags and lunged for the bedroom doorknob. All I could think of was bursting through that door right now and shattering the disgusting reality of these people. "You two, open this door right now." The moment I grabbed the doorknob and tried to turn it, Mrs. Albright, who had been hiding in the kitchen, flew out like a bolt of lightning and frantically pulled my sleeve and arm back. Mrs. Albright's strength was so great that I stumbled backward and hit the wall. "Mrs. Albright, let go. Silas and that woman are in there." Mrs. Albright, her face pale, covered my mouth and whispered desperately in my ear, "Ma'am, absolutely do not open it. It's a trap. They've set up a camera to film you going crazy and attacking them." It was as if a bucket of cold water had been thrown over me. My whole body froze. "A camera?" Mrs. Albright, trembling, quickly explained the situation. How Rochelle had arrived at 3, how Corinne had given her the drug juice, and how they had locked her in the bedroom from the outside. At that moment, the door to the small room burst open, and Corinne stormed out. Her face was ashen, but her eyes were filled with venom. "Alara, what are you doing? It looks like your husband is cheating on you, and you're not going in? Open the door and check right now." Following her, Judith also came out, her hair disheveled, and screamed, "What's all this commotion, Alara? Are you throwing another tantrum because you don't trust your husband?" Their panicked eyes, their desperate gestures to push me into the bedroom, that was the perfect proof that Mrs. Albright's words were true. From the bedroom, Rochelle's faint screams were still leaking out. It was the sound of someone whose consciousness was clouded by drugs, on the verge of suffocating. I clenched my trembling hands into fists and took a deep breath. If I give in to anger, I lose. I will not move according to their script. I took out my smartphone and dialed 911. Corinne flew at me in a panic. "Are you crazy? Why are you calling the police?" I shoved Corinne away and said calmly and clearly, "There's a person collapsing and dying in the bedroom, so of course we have to call an ambulance and the police. You were the one who suggested it might be an affair. So let's open the door in the presence of the police and have a look." After the call, I immediately called the building's security office and the manager. "Mr. Henderson, there's a situation in my apartment where someone might be held captive and needs rescue. I've called the police, so could you and a security guard please come up and be witnesses? If I open the door myself, I might be framed." 5 minutes later, with the sound of sirens, 2 police officers, paramedics, a security guard, and the building manager flooded into my 12th floor apartment. A few neighbors also poked their heads out of their doors, murmuring. Judith collapsed to the floor and started wailing loudly. "My daughter-in-law has gone crazy. She's called the police on her own husband. Has anyone ever seen such a shameful thing?" A police officer turned to me and asked, "Are you the one who called? What's the situation?" Without a single tremor in my fingertips, I answered, "I am Alara Miller, the owner of this home." While I was out, my husband and another woman entered this bedroom, and the door was locked. I heard cries for help from inside, but there's a high possibility that this is a trap set by my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, so I did not open the door without witnesses. "Please unlock the door immediately." Following the police's instructions, the security guard used a master key to unlock the bedroom door with a click. A nauseating, cloying medicinal smell hit my nose. The scene inside was not an affair. It was a grim crime scene. Silas was half naked, passed out under the bed amidst his own vomit, and Rochelle, drenched in sweat, was clutching her chest and crawling on the floor, gasping for air. The paramedics rushed in and put an oxygen mask on Rochelle. The building manager scanned the room with sharp eyes. "Hey, officer, isn't that a camera behind the tissue box on the TV stand over there?" A police officer, wearing gloves, picked up the camera. The lens was not aimed at the bed, but precisely at the bedroom door, and a red light was blinking, indicating it was recording. Corinne's face turned ashen gray, and she stumbled backward. An officer turned to her and asked sternly, "Whose camera is this?" It's not mine. That woman, Mrs. Albright, she must have planted it," Corinne blurted out, trying to feign ignorance. Just then, Mrs. Albright, who had been quietly watching the situation from the back, took an old flip phone out of her pocket. "Officer, I recorded what those two were plotting earlier." When she pressed the play button, Corinne's voice filled the living room. "Mom, when Alara gets home and bursts through that door, my script will be a huge success. We'll film her acting like a crazy woman, and if we threaten to spread the video at her company, she'll get scared and sign the loan documents." Following that, Judith's voice also played. "That's right. Let's take this opportunity to completely break her spirit and make her transfer the deed to Silas's name. We'll suck her dry to the bone." Rochelle, being carried out on a stretcher, heard the voices and, with bloodshot eyes, pointed a finger at Corinne. "That woman stole my phone. She lured me here, saying she'd pay back the debt." Inside Corinne's bag, they found not only Rochelle's powered-off smartphone but also copies of my ID, the property title, and even a forged quitclaim deed transferring the condo to Silas, along with a home equity loan power of attorney featuring my forged signature. Everyone present at the scene was shocked. This wasn't just a simple in-law problem or a marital spat. It was a major crime involving fraud, false imprisonment, illegal filming, and forgery of private documents. The police arrested Corinne and Judith on the spot as prime suspects. Until the moment the handcuffs were clicked on her wrists, Judith spat curses at me. "You venomous woman, you've ruined my family. You'll be punished by heaven." I stood with my arms crossed and looked down at her coldly. "No, Judith. The ones who ruined this family are you and your son's greed. I just protected my home and my daughter." A few days later, after all the chaos had passed, I filed for divorce and a restraining order against my husband with Rebecca's help. Silas, through the glass of the visitation room at the detention center, pressed his hands against the glass and begged me desperately, tears streaming down his face. Alara, it wasn't my fault. It was all Mom and Corinne's scheme. They sweet-talked me, saying if we put the house in joint tenancy, we could pay off the debt. I just wanted to protect my family. Believe me. I just stared coldly at his desperate excuses. In my heart, there was no longer any anger or sadness, not even a speck of ash. The $200,000 debt was recognized as Silas's separate debt, and my condo was completely untouched. Rochelle sued Silas for fraud, and the man named Vince was eventually caught by the police. Corinne, facing charges of false imprisonment and forgery of official documents, could not avoid a prison sentence. With no money for a lawyer, she was assigned a public defender. Judith was released on probation due to her age, but with both her son and daughter facing prison, she fled back to her family home in Wisconsin like a fugitive in the night. One peaceful evening, after everything was over, the warm smell of simmering soup filled the kitchen of my condo. On the dining table were a roasted chicken, a simple green salad, and 3 plates filled with warm mashed potatoes. My plate, Willa's plate, and Mrs. Albright's plate. I no longer call Mrs. Albright my housekeeper. She is the benefactor who pulled me up from the depths of hell in a moment of crisis, and a warm guardian to my daughter. Willa placed a plump piece of omelet on my plate and beamed. Mommy, this is for you. You eat all of it. I saved your portion for you. Stroking my child's head, I let a single tear, which I had been holding back, fall. Not because I was sad. It was from the relief of finally being able to take a deep, heartfelt breath in my own home.